Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
The interesting thing is that you said the wealthy families, but I think what you just said applies across the entire board. I don't care. Well, I'm sure you're very familiar with Les Brown. And
No,
no,
tell me.
Les Brown, how he's got to be in his 70s or 80s now, but he was born in the World War II era. But him and his, I believe his twin brother were literally born to a single mother on the floor of a vacant factory. So, and he was raised obviously you can't get any more lower circumstances than that.
Right. People
And
raised by wolves would have had a better outcome. And I know. I hear you.
yeah. So, but and I it's been a while since I've actually read his story, but he's built an empire, and he's a motivational speaker now. And I think he's old enough that he's retired, but
Right.
I know at least his son has gone into the same business. But you got to look up Les Brown.
I will.
Because,
I will.
But Ben Carson, he's the same way. He was in pretty
Yeah.
humble
He.
circumstances, and
Yes.
um,
Yes.
but his mom came to the point where I think she reached the point that of recognition, which is fortunate, that she basically said, "You boys are not just going to sit in front of this TV and veg anymore," and
Right.
turned the
Right.
TV off
Right.
and made them start reading books. And Ben Carson, one of the greatest neurosurgeons to ever exist, but he pulled himself out of the dire circumstances. And I just think when you have examples of other people that have done amazing things despite coming from the lowest of low circumstances, that if they can do it, then everybody can do it. They just have
Right.
to.
Although I have to say that, yes, but the thing that I recognize is not everybody can do it for whatever reason. Not everybody has the capacity to pull it together, and it's and when you think about it, it's like Ben Carson in the situation where he was able to complete an education, go on to be one of the most renowned pediatric neurosurgeons, is amazing, but it really is not the norm. And whatever reason, you could take that same kid and put him in those same circumstances, and he would most likely not see the success that Ben Carson did in terms of his, his choices and his education. And I think that, it could be for a number of reasons. Maybe it's because he had an engaged mom. Um, something within him made him want to do it. You know, it's there's so many moving pieces. There's so many variables. Um, it's it's trying to figure out what it is that sets off that switch that makes the person realize that it's something that they can do. One of the
Yeah.
things that I was shocked at, and this was just clearly my own naivety when I was working in the shelter, was just how. So there came a point where they were having me run the DV support groups. And one of the things that really surprised me was how that a lot of them were illiterate. A lot of them did not have the basics in terms of being able to construct a coherent sentence.
Mm.
And I don't know why, but I was shocked. And I remember I had tried to put together an exercise where I had the, the women sort of write something down. And I was shocked at how many of them were unable to do that, were unable to take part in that exercise. And then it became they can't write a coherent sentence. They now have these kids that they're here with, and they're fleeing a situation. How are they going? I mean, it's not to say it can't be done, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's more the norm that it isn't done, that they somehow teach themselves to read and, you know, move in the world as successes, raise children that are, so it's just like there's so many things, there's so many factors, you know. Um, and I know that I would really try to encourage them to really try to educate themselves in the way of being able to read, being able to, because what a drawback that is. You, if you're going to sign the lease to an apartment and you can't really, and you don't have the faculties to look at the lease and really understand, then you're already moving in the world at a disadvantage.
Yeah. Oh, sure, for sure.
So,
But
yeah.
yeah,
So,
a lot
so,
of that though is you think about, again, let's go back to Les Brown.
right,
Some point in his young life, and I think this has to happen in their younger areas, like the women that you're talking about, they're already so deep into it that they're probably going to need help from society for the rest of their lives. But their children, at some point, they've got to look at their children and say, this kid still has a chance to avoid the life that I have. And the way to do that is to turn the TV off, unplug the internet, get them educated in a way while they're younger, so that, like Ben Carson, for example, he always says that because his mother forced him to turn the TV off and start reading books, he developed a love of reading and a love of learning and that kind of thing.
right,
And that's,
right.
yeah, you can't, you,
I
you
mean,
can do, you can do what you can with people that are already in the shelter
right,
to
right.
help them. But the kids that are in the shelter with them is where, society needs to focus on, because that's by that time, yeah, it's
Right. I mean,
really,
it's, one of the things too that was also very interesting to me was that a lot of the women that I worked with too were, were in the foster care system.
mm,
So again, a lot of them lacked that parental, you know, and look, it's a very convoluted, very difficult situation. And again, that awareness, it's sort of flipping the switch on that awareness,
yeah,
because a lot of the young women, you know, aside from being very young themselves, um, didn't have that, the ability to sort of self-reflect and even seriously and meaningfully consider what they were representing for their children.
mm. They didn't have the ability to do it, or had never really
I
gone
think I
through the
think everybody
exercise.
has, right. I think that's the thing. I think everybody has the capacity to
Hmm.
do it. But I think the question is, what is it going to take to flip that switch? And for everybody, I think it's different.
Yeah.
you know? And for everybody, there's a different story, you know? For some people, it's trauma. For some people, you know, it's the trauma of abuse, it's the trauma of neglect, it's the trauma of growing up in systems that really were not designed to really help, but really just to hold you there until you were of age.
Yeah.
And having worked very intimately with women, you know, and every now and again, you had the woman that came in that, you know, I remember one woman in particular who was like really a light, the switch was flipped for her, and she wanted to get into school. She wanted to start her schooling. She wanted to set her kids up. She wanted to get her apartment. She wanted to remake herself. But most of the clients were beaten down and depressed. And the switch for them was just off.
Mm.
And a lot of them would go back to the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them would just wait until they could secure housing and move out, but not really do anything to take the wheel in terms of making things better for their lives and their kids. And you know, and look, I mean, it's again, it's a very so what I'm saying is that like the Ben Carsons and the Les Browns are actually more, in my experience, the exception to the rule, because for whatever reason, you know, most people just don't have the capacity, whether or not it's that they don't believe in themselves, they don't think of themselves as being able to ever accomplish those types of things for whatever reason.
Mm.
You know, you take somebody that has a fourth grade education, and are they going to really see themselves as completing you know, I'm not even going to say college, because you could, you know, do you could, you know, work for the MTA and answer phones, and you'll get benefits, and you know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, that's even something that, like, when my niece was like, I don't know, I don't really want to go to college, I was like, okay, well, you know, you don't need to. That's not, you know, that's not what this is about. It's what are you going to do so that you can take care of yourself, so that you don't have to worry or be dependent on anybody or any system to have your needs met. Because ideally, that's what you don't want.
Yeah. Well, and I think when somebody like you, who is in a basically a position of authority, or at least you're on the outside looking in, and you pulled some of the people in the shelter aside and said, "You can do it. I believe in you. You
Hmm.
have the ability. You may not see it right now, but I see it, and you have the ability
Absolutely.
to pull yourself out of this situation." And you know, there's a huge difference, and I between education and schooling. And I
Right.
think there are far too many people that look at the answer of schooling, whereas school, you know, there's lots of you know, being in the forensics world, I tell you what, there's a lot of PhD types that I've met that are complete idiots.
Oh,
And
yeah,
yeah, they're
absolutely. You
they're
know,
uh, lucky to be functioning.
right,
So
right,
schooling is not the answer, but education is. And you,
right,
no matter how you get it, you have to get educated in a way. And what I mean by that is, well, it's pretty obvious, I think, but you have to be able to read and write. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to do the basics. You don't need to be able to, you know, uh, go into figure out, you know, advanced calculus. that's not going to necessarily
Right.
help you in life.
Right. No. No.
But yeah, being able to write a coherent sentence, that's
Is
something
yeah,
that
exactly.
is,
Exactly.
but it's right there, and it doesn't take a massive amount of effort to do that. So, all right. Well, anyway, I just so that I don't have you all day. Although I tell you that, yeah, this conversation is fascinating, and it's one of those
Isn't
things
it
where
though? It really,
I
yeah.
yeah, we're
It's
gonna
just like
solve.
peeling back the layers and
Yeah,
just, try to, but I think like that's what an interest in true crime for us, Jared, does, because we're always sort of looking at it and just kind of
yeah.
doing the
Well,
Rolodex. I mean, I don't know if people even know what Rolodex are anymore. Just the shuffling through like all the, like what's happening here, what went on here. This is what you could do. This is what you shouldn't do.
yeah.
How did we get here? It's like and I think like that's the ultimate question. How did we get here?
Well, and I think also, um, and for those of you that are out here, you know what? Comment, send us some questions, and maybe Kim and I
Absolutely.
can get back together and we can answer some of them. But for those of you that are listening or watching on YouTube or whatever platform you're on, answer me this: what is the difference? What was the trigger that take Les Brown, take Dr. Ben Carson, whoever, you look at anybody that's successful in life, and I'll bet you if you go back far enough, you can look at them, and not there's not very many people that are multi millionaires nowadays that were born on the floor of an abandoned factory. So if you look at Les
Right.
Brown, what what was why is Les Brown a multimillionaire instead of being a serial killer that is in prison? Because
Right.
he could have gone either direction.
Yeah.
And
No,
if
absolutely.
if you solely look at his circumstances in life, you would have said, I bet you there's a bigger chance that he had ended up in prison than being a multimillionaire and a motivational speaker. So
Right. But you
what
could
was the
also,
yeah,
no, but I could say, also on the flip side, just as we were talking and I was sharing about the case of um Joe Guy Jr., what compelled this young man who reportedly had a loving family, parents that loved him, a stable home, support through school, what compelled him to become what he became, which was a murderer of the most despicable kind.
yeah. No, I agree. It can go both directions, but I think for both of them, the common thread is the decision to actually take responsibility for themselves, and to
Yeah,
you know at some junction somebody either did or didn't um, pull them aside and say, what are you going to do to make your life better? And so
right, right. Because at the
yeah,
end of the day, that's who you have. That autonomy is yours, and that is what you have control over.
yeah, 100%. So listen, last thing, let's flip this a little bit and uh, lighten things up, because
Yeah, I
right now
know. We was like,
I think the whole audience is like in a fit of depression. Everybody's like, I need a drink. So Kim,
right.
let's talk about your podcast, Staycation.
Yes,
So really briefly, first, I know your husband and a family friend are all
yes,
part of it. So tell us about
yes.
your podcast. And in the process of doing that, tell us about the craziest story you've ever discussed on your podcast.
So, Slaycation is mysterious, is murders, mysterious deaths, and disappearances while on vacation. Um, and we kind of go through a lot of these, cases where, you know, either a person is missing or they're dead, sometimes at the hands of a partner, sometimes a stranger, sometimes they disappear. Um, I think one of the craziest cases is the one that I mentioned with Joel Guy, and you have to Google that when you get off with me, Jared. Just
Yeah.
I would actually love to talk to you about that, but that was
Well, we've
crazy
kind of hit on
because
that one. So bring up another
yes,
example just to give a little
yes,
flavor to it.
right. But the other one I was going to say was, and this was more popular, but I realized I didn't know all the details, and we covered it pretty recently. Was the North Korean case of Otto Warmbier, who went on vacation, who took a trip with a tour guide, with a tour group to North Korea, was detained for reportedly attempting to take a poster on a secret floor on a hotel where he shouldn't have been. Meaning that this hotel had a floor that wasn't open to. Did you hear about this case at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Crazy. That was crazy to me. And that was crazy to me. And I'll tell you why, Jerry. Because North Korea. And then I went down this rabbit hole of all things North Korea.
Yeah.
And I had read this book called Nothing to Envy, which way back, even before I did this case. So I always was, and again, I'm very curious. North Korea, I'm very curious about that. The Kim dynasty is fascinating to me. How that exists is still fascinating to me. How it's still there is fascinating to me. That to me is, I guess, one of those cases of how poor Otto, I am flummoxed by how that happened to him. Like, what happened?
Oh, well, okay. Um, having traveled in a lot of different foreign countries,
Right.
um, if you, I'm sorry, if you um, are traveling in a foreign country, uh, I mean, my thing is like, it doesn't matter if I'm going to China, if I'm going
Right.
to South Africa. Like, for example, in South Africa, they always eat with with a knife and fork in either hand, and so you scoop up, things onto your fork with
Right.
your knife. You don't ever like. Um, I mean, for me, anyway. Well, I don't want to get into my eating habits here, but
Now you
the
can get into your eating
no,
habits.
I'm not going to do it. The
I
thing
can't
is,
convince you.
yeah, just not gonna. I'm not taking that bait.
Oh
But the
my
thing
God.
is, I by doing a little bit of research into the country, you learn about some of their traditions. You learn about how not to offend the people over there. Uh,
Yes,
like,
absolutely. Yeah. And there's
um,
a lot of rules there.
yeah, well, and I go to I lived in Japan for a couple of years, but nowadays, um, the Japanese people are extremely reserved and
Yes.
talking loudly on your phone on the subway is considered extremely rude.
Yes.
Making a TikTok video in the middle of the subway is considered just absolutely stupid. And yet there's
Not
all
doing
these
that.
Americans that go over there and they're doing pull-ups on the bars and
Yes.
acting like just complete fools.
Right.
Um, and you know, with just a little bit of research, it doesn't take much to understand, how to actually fit in, how to enjoy the country, how to see things and enjoy it and not get yourself in trouble. Well, to
You
me,
think you think Otto was up to some shenanigans?
well, the fact that he's got a poster, an anti-government poster,
Yeah.
and
Well, yeah.
goes on to a hotel floor that he knows he's not supposed to be on. What do you think is going to happen, moron?
Yeah, look, I gotta say, Jared, that is, you'd really, really have to understand the culture. It's like know your audience.
Yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
that's key. And again, that just speaks to sort of like even like the privilege of our kids. You know, um, I'm always like, I always tell my kid, like, pay attention to your surroundings. And the best piece of advice that I can give you, and I said this to her, is don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. And you'll know what that looks like. You'll know what that looks like. Because if you're thinking of doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing, then you're getting ready to do something stupid.
Yeah. Well, again,
And unfortunately for Otto, um, you know, that one knuckleheaded prank really cost him. And I don't think, again, we really, people, particularly young people, I understand consequences.
yeah. Well, that
And
that goes
that,
all the way back to the whole conversation that we've been having is,
yes,
you know,
exactly,
the
exactly.
the kids that have never had to actually do a push-up, never had to actually pull weeds, never actually had to go without internet for a day, have no concept of, you
You're
know what,
right.
if I go into this dictator level uh, country on vacation and take a political poster that's against the dictatorship,
Yeah,
I might get in trouble.
right.
And if Otto, you you said poor Otto, I'm like, no, Otto's
No
an idiot.
sympathy for Otto.
Yeah, he deserved everything he got because if you can't put that together, that maybe I shouldn't do this, then yeah, you're either going to learn
Yeah, look, I
earlier or
get that. Yeah, look, I get that, Jared. I guess my thing is that, I'm not so much me, but a lot of 20 something year olds like are kind of knuckleheads.
mm,
And I think if anything, you know, Otto is that cautionary tale in the sense that, you know, that being a knucklehead can be, fatal. And, you know, I wish that most knuckleheaded 20 something year olds have the grace of a second chance or an
mhm,
opportunity to learn from their mistake. And I
yeah,
say poor Otto because I'm like, he really didn't get that opportunity. And of course, I'm sure you'll agree, he didn't deserve what he had, what happened to him. He didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve to, you know, have to die
yeah,
because of a silly prank, which is what it was. I mean, you know, nobody got hurt except him. You know,
yeah. No,
it was
I
it
agree,
was
but
it was a knuckleheaded thing, and it's sort of like there before the grace of God go I. I We all know knuckleheaded teens, young adults that you know, there before the grace of God, they were able to come out on the other side of it.
oh,
And
believe
the
me,
one thing that, yeah, yeah,
my guardian angel has had to work overtime with some of the
right.
knuckleheaded things. But at the same time, you're like, well, it's like that story that I was telling you about the Chinese lady that was in safari in South Africa.
Yes,
That
yes,
my friends over
yes.
there was, you're in South Africa, you get out of your car and walk halfway toward a pride of lions to get a picture. And then she turned her back on the
And
pride.
she became lunch.
Yeah. Yeah. They like, oh, you know what? Free meal. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's a pretty rapid lesson to be learned right there, you know, both to this, you know, the lady that got eaten and
Yeah.
and whoever was taking the picture of her in the car, you know, somebody at some junction say intervention.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Like don't do
yeah.
that.
No, I remember in that same trip, this friend of mine who was working with the South Africa Police Services, and he took me out to this place where they feed the lions. They literally have a side of beef in the back of a trailer, and the worker pulls up, and it's like a big circle. And cars are parked all the way around this thing, and a lot of people were in car. Like I was in a truck, so I was a little bit elevated, but a lot of these people were in cars that the lions just literally once the side of beef was in the middle of this circle, and you know the circle's probably 100 meters wide, you know
Hmm.
the diameter of it, and um, these lions would just come out of the bush and they would just appear. It's just absolutely just
That sounds
majestic watching them come out of there, and they'd come out of nowhere. And these lions, like even the female lions, would
hmm
literally, if you're sitting in a regular sedan, you would look these lions straight in the eye. That's how big these animals are. And a
right.
lot of these people had their windows open.
Yes, I've seen that. That's
Yeah, and it's just
crazy.
like, are you stupid? These lions, if they literally wanted to reach into your car and sink their claws into your chest, they could pull you out of that car that fast. But fortunately, they had food in the middle, and that's where they were headed to. But I started to crack my window because it was getting a little stuffy in there, and my friend basically said, "Whoa, you roll that thing back up,"
Like right now, right?
because the lion could also easily just reach up and put their
Yeah,
claws through that window and just shatter it,
right.
and then
Oh my God,
you
that's
become
right.
lunch. And
Big time. Oh
but
my
you know,
gosh.
you get into these circumstances. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of Yellowstone Park, if you're in the middle of a safari, or if you're in the middle of Brooklyn. There's things that
Right.
can there's things that can get you in lots of or
Yes.
go into some
Yes.
really hostile area like North Korea, and if you do something stupid, you can end up really dead really quick. And
Yeah. Well, it's not the
it's
place really, like, yeah, to your point, it's not the place to hone those
yeah,
knuckleheaded chops. Like it's it's just not. It's not. It's not.
yeah,
It is not. Um, you know. I think also too, a lot of the other crazier case, some of the things that I noted too is how many of these cases there were, particularly where there were the partners involved, is the red flags, like the many red flags that sort of was a sign of things to come,
hmm
you know.
yeah. Well,
And so I'm always the first to say,
yeah,
if you're struggling in your relationship, maybe it's not the trip. If you want to do a getaway, go separately and maybe Zoom an hour a day while you're away separately. But maybe don't travel together, especially if there's red flags.
yeah. All right. Well, Kim, again, yeah, these kind of as much as I want to solve the world's problems on today's episode of All Things Crime, I don't think we're going to make it.
I
So
know I don't think we're going to be able to
yeah,
do it, but I think
but
we're off to a good start.
yeah, I think so too. We're 98% there.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
all right, Kim, thank you so very much for coming on, and we appreciate everything that you've brought to the show today.
Jared,
Again,
thank you so
everybody.
much for having me. It was so much fun.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely my pleasure. So again, go to the podcast Staycation.
Slaycation. Remember Slay,
Slaycation.
Slaycation.
You're right. Not
Yes.
staycation, Slaycation. So as in getting dead. So,
While on, or mysteriously disappeared while on vacation.
well, a lot of times the same thing. So, um,
Yes.
so what platforms are you on?
You can find us on Facebook, Slaycation. We have a group, Slaycators Only. Come and join us. And Instagram, Slaycation WTF, one word. And if and yeah, and I'm also on That Girl Knits because I am a compulsive crafter. So if you like pattern ideas, you can join me there too.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody go join those and link up with Kim on all these social media platforms. And I'm assuming you're on Spotify and all those others.
Yes, where you can find us, Slaycation, on anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify.
Perfect. All right, Kim. Well, tell everybody hi for me. And
I sure will.
next time I'm in Brooklyn, we'll have to go do lunch.
Yes, let's do it.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.